Good evening. Welcome to the 8th session of our NET-JRF Crash Course, Embark, hosted by MSF EFLU, Hyderabad. We discussed the topic communication in our previous session, which was successfully led by Ashik sir. I hope that session was enlightening for you all. Today, we are going to have an exciting session on the topic Teaching Aptitude by our respected faculty, Ms. Kavya Renjit ma'am. Kavya ma'am is a research scholar at the Department of Indian and World Literature, the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. So let's welcome our research person for this session. Once again, welcome all of you.
Thank you, Risha. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining for this session. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. Thank you. So I'll try sharing this. Please let me know if it is visible to you. Can everyone see the slides now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I hope we can begin this session. So today I would be talking about, I would be looking at some of the key points, some of the very important points, which come under the unit 1 of UGC NET paper 1, and that's teaching aptitude. So before I begin, I would like to just give you a short introduction into the way that the NET examination. So I know the examinations are coming up, they are around the corner. So this time, if not possible, but maybe in the next attempts as well, this sort of, if it helps, it could be made use of. So I would like to tell you some of the mistakes that I made in my preparation in the beginning, which I rectified later, which helped me to secure JRF. So the thing was that initially I used to prepare by giving a lot of importance to paper 2. Which is my subject is English. So that's how we used to prepare. But in the first attempt and first 2 attempts, I understood that that would not be the accurate strategy to follow. Because I realized that in order to attain JRF, the maximum marks that we could possibly gain is in paper 1. So if we pay particular attention to paper 1, especially in the areas which we are good at, if we particularly pay attention to those areas and also look at the recurrent questions that come in paper 1, it can actually help us attain JRF. Because paper 2, what happens is that from my observation, I have seen that usually there is always this part that comes in paper 2, which would be very difficult. That is, which could be out of syllabus and which could be beyond the ones that we have already prepared. But when it comes to paper 1, if we are very strong in the areas which are always repeated in the question paper, then there is always this possibility towards attaining JRF. So teaching aptitude is actually one of these areas which gets focused in paper 1 always. And you can see that around 4 to 5 questions are always asked from this section. And also, in my opinion, it is relatively an easier part when compared to other areas like research, methodology, or even data interpretation, or areas like that. It could be different for different people, but then I feel like if we pay a little bit attention to this area, then you can easily score the 4 or 5 questions that come from this area. So let me begin the session. So today we would be talking about the key areas that I'll be discussing today would be, first topic is nature of teaching. What comes under teaching and what are the characteristics of teaching and what actually comprises the process of teaching. That is what comes under the nature of teaching. The second topic would be objectives of teaching. So everything has an objective, right? Even if it is about research, even if it is about learning or teaching, everything is centered on a particular or different objectives. So here we would look at the various objectives of teaching. So after nature, we would go into the objectives of teaching, and then we would look at who is a good teacher and a good learner. So here, what it means by a good teacher and good learner, there are certain characteristics which could be attributed towards learning and teaching, or effective teaching and effective learning. So we would look at what are these characteristics which make a particular learning or teaching effective. So what has to be the primary concern for a teacher or a learner to be effective? The communication should happen, or the understanding should happen between the teacher and the learner. So what characteristics are required for a proper or effective understanding to take place? That would be dealt with in the session on characteristics. Next, factors affecting learners. So what are the learning and teaching, the factors which affect the productivity or the effectiveness of a learning and teaching process? That is also one thing we would look at. Then we would go into the methods of teaching. We would just sum up all these points. We wouldn't go detail into every point, but then we would look at all the major areas that needs to be covered. So the methods of teaching, then teaching aids, things which are particular tools or the resources that can be used in teaching. We look at the evaluation method, because evaluation is again the second important step that comes in teaching. So we would look at the evaluation of the teacher as the learner. Evaluation methods. Then we would look at a concept called Bloom's taxonomy. Then we would look at domains of learning, and then also a few questions. So getting into the session. Nature of teaching. So what do you mean by the nature of something? The nature of something refers to the way in structure, or the way or whatever outcome that can be obtained from a particular procedure or a phenomenon. So here we are looking at the process of teaching. So teaching is usually referred to as means of interaction between a teacher and student for their mutual benefit of the exchange of knowledge. So here we have to look at a particular key terms, which are first one is interaction. So teaching is basically an interaction that happens between two key factors. So which are the key factors in this context? One is the teacher, who could be called the knowledge imparter, or the one who gives the knowledge. And the second is the student, who is the knowledge gainer, or the one who benefits from the teaching process, or the knowledge imparting. So it is for the mutual benefit and exchange of knowledge that the process of teaching takes place. So it is an interaction, and the key participants are the teacher and the student. And what happens, or what is expected out of an effective teaching, is the mutual benefit through exchange of knowledge, enhancing the knowledge repository of both the teacher and the learner. Basically, it's a very systematic process, and the effectiveness of teaching will depend on the teacher's involvement, interest, and knowledge base. So here there are three factors. When we look at it from the teacher's point of view, we can say that the effectiveness of teaching will depend on the teacher's involvement, interest, and also the subject knowledge base of the teacher. So it's a very systematic process. Now, the three major components that come under the teaching process are the teacher, the student, and the content that gets shared. So again, I'm repeating that we have to look at the key terms here, because these are the terms that can be used in the question paper, or that would come up in the question paper when questions from this area are being asked. So the last point is nature of teaching. Nature of teaching can be called as dynamic. So what do you mean by dynamic in this context? That is, teaching is a process which is always evolving. Like I said, or like I mentioned before, it involves a mutual benefit and the exchange of knowledge between the teacher and the learner. So how does this knowledge exchange take place? So that is what is meant by a dynamic process. That is something which changes always take place. And this, for the teaching process to be effective, this changes should be positive. So the positive changes when it comes to the context of teaching are the effectiveness that comes out of the teaching and the knowledge that the learner gets through the teaching. So nature of teaching, it is a dynamic process. It's a humane process, and it is social. It's basically an interaction that happens between the teacher and the student. But when the student goes out of the classroom atmosphere. The student goes out into the society, and therefore the knowledge that the student has gained from the classroom is being made use of in a larger context, which is called society. So it becomes a social process, and it's influenced by human factors. It is an art as well as a science. So why is it called an art as well as a science? So there are scientific methods, or there are particular techniques which could be used in the process of teaching. Therefore, it's definitely a science. How does it become an art? So when a particular teacher applies his or her subjective attitudes or his or her subjective ways of teaching, it becomes an art. So we all know that we all would have had favorite teachers, teachers who we would call like, oh, this is a very effective teacher, or he or she is a very good teacher. So some of the attributes which make a person a good teacher could be connected with teaching as an art form, like how they involve or how they add their own personal elements into the process of teaching to make it interesting. So that's why it is called an art as well as a science. Then it also involves the knowledge and skill of the teacher. So that's about the nature of teaching. Moving on, we have the characteristics of teaching. So the first characteristic is it is intended to provide guidance to the students. So a teaching process means you're providing information, and thereby you're guiding a particular student into, or they are providing an opening into a phase of knowledge into a student. Lesson planning and things like that, right? Which is associated with the process of teaching. So a concrete planning or a concrete setup and structure is very essential when it comes to the characteristics of teaching. So for a teaching process to be effective, there needs to be accurate planning, evaluation of the topic to be discussed, and implementing these topics according to the planning. And also there should be an organization which accommodates the understandings and which accommodates the needs of the students. Third point, teaching again is an interactive process that happens between the student and teacher, like I mentioned before. Fourth, it's flexible and measurable. That is, the quality of teaching needs to be measured for better outcomes to come in the students. So how does it become a flexible process? Again, like I referred to in the previous slide, when teaching becomes an art, and when the teacher brings in his or her personal elements or personal talent into to be put into becoming a skillful teacher, then it becomes a very flexible process, and in which knowledge could be imparted. And it can also be measured also, which we would come later when it comes to the evaluation methods. Now, it's an effective way to share knowledge. And then it's a continuous process. So what do you mean by continuous in the context of teaching? That is, teaching does not occur just in between the four walls of the classroom. So now we know that the whole idea of teaching has elaborated or has expanded from just being the rote learning that happens inside a classroom, and it has expanded beyond the four walls of the classroom. We now have online learning, like what we are doing now. And then there are also other things that we learn from outside the domain of what we could be called conventional teaching. That is, we learn things through experiences, and then we also put to use the teaching or the classroom experience that we have had into the when we come out into the society. So that's why it is called a continuous process. It doesn't end within the classroom. In the classroom, we get knowledge, we are being taught certain ideas, theories, and everything. But then when it comes to the applicability level of it, it becomes a continuous process. And that goes beyond the reading of books. We develop practical knowledge and also life skills that can be used when we come out into the society. So that's why it's called a continuous process. Again, another important point is that it requires a certain level of specialization so that in-depth knowledge gets imparted. So teaching shouldn't be a peripheral or a superficial process. So if somebody or if a teacher teaches something, then it has to have that depth in the students. And therefore, there should be a certain level of specialization. A teacher who's teaching something should be well versed in that area so that in-depth knowledge gets imparted to the students. Last point, it brings about certain changes in the learner. So this could be connected to the process, the continuous process that teaching is. Like I mentioned, it is something which goes beyond the four walls of the classroom. So it actually shapes the overall personality, attitude, and behavior of a student. And effective teaching is what it actually does is it churns out a particular student into a very socially responsible human being. So that's what, by bringing about certain changes in the learner, it implies both the changes that happen at the knowledge level as well as the changes that enable the student to become a social being. Moving on, we have certain modes of teaching. So here by modes of teaching, what we intend to say is that these are the modes or the methods that work simultaneously to bring about the desired changes in the student. So teaching, one is teaching that brings changes in the behavior of students. Another is conditioning. Conditioning is a process that improves the learning skills of students, because students are they are exposed to certain methods or certain ways of learning, and that gets conditioned, and that improves the learning skills of students. Then training. Training shapes the behavior and conduct. We can see that trainings are usually given when a particular area needs to be studied in depth, or needs to be one needs to be well versed in a particular area. So that training shapes the behavior and conduct, which will favorably mold that person and into an expert in that field. Then instruction provides a gaining of knowledge, which is very, very clear. Then comes indoctrination. Indoctrination is the method or the process where the student forms beliefs in his or her brain through the methods or through the ways of teaching and through the knowledge that has been imparted to the student. So we know teaching, conditioning, training, instruction, and indoctrination. These are several modes of teaching which are part of the process. Now we come into the objectives of teaching. So the major objectives, like I said before, there is every process has certain aims, right? So we all learn something so that we can make it applicable, or it can have an applicability somewhere later. So similarly, the process of teaching also has certain objectives. A teacher doesn't come and just take a class and then leave. They have certain objectives in their mind, and the primary or the most important objective of teaching is to bring about a desirable change in the student, right? So an effective teacher would attempt to bring about desirable changes in the students. So what are the desirable changes in the students? We could say that expanding their knowledge base is one desirable change, and making them effective social beings is another desirable change, and contributing towards the overall personality and behavioral development of the student is another desirable change. So likewise, the objectives of teaching, the primary important objective of teaching is to bring about a desirable change in the student. Next, sharing of knowledge with the students to make them aware of concepts. So that is the second objective. The teacher intends to share the piece of knowledge that he or she has with the students so that they become aware of the things happening around them or of the particular concepts that are being discussed. So sharing of knowledge and awareness of concepts through the sharing of knowledge. Third point is building the skills that are required for learning. So a teacher cannot simply go and explain the points and then come back. The teacher has to also work in building the skills that are required for learning. Learning requires certain skills, or there are different modes of learning, which when studied or which when practiced would help knowing about things easier. So a teacher is also responsible for developing these skills in the student. A student has to be helped with developing these sort of skills, which would enable him or her to effectively learn a new concept or a new topic. So building the skills that are required for learning. Then the overall behavioral development of the student, which has been mentioned earlier again. So to bring about desirable changes in the student, sharing of knowledge with the students to make them aware of concepts, building the skills that are required for learning, and then also overall behavioral development of the student. So here again, we have to focus on the key terms, which are desirable changes, sharing of knowledge, awareness of concepts, building of skills, and then overall behavioral development. Moving on, I have a few variables in teaching. So what is a variable? A variable is something that changes over a particular period of time. So if an action produces a change in something, then whatever has experienced that change could be called a variable. So in the process of teaching, there are three variables. One is the student. So the student here could be called the dependent variable. So why dependent? Because the student undergoes changes as a result of the teaching process. So here the student is subjected to the knowledge that is being imparted to him or her by the teacher. So here the student is dependent on the teacher in gaining the knowledge. Therefore, the student becomes the dependent variable. So student is a variable because the student undergoes changes, and the student is dependent because the student takes knowledge from the teacher. All right. So the student is the active or the functional part in the teaching process. So again, we know the student is a variable because the student undergoes changes. It's a dependent variable because he or she listens to the teacher and gets knowledge from the teacher, who becomes the person who imparts the knowledge. And again, the student is the active or the functional part in the teaching process because the student is made to do certain things, or the student is made to develop their skills, and therefore they are always in the process of change or in the process of evolving. Then comes the teacher. The teacher here is also a variable. Why? Because the teacher also undergoes changes. Like you might have, I have definitely come across such situations in my life wherein some of the teachers, they would come into our class and they would tell us that you have also taught us a lot of things. So it wasn't a one-way process. So we taught you a lot of things and we could also learn a lot of things from you. So this mutual process makes the teacher also a variable. The teacher is also undergoing changes through the whole process of learning. But the teacher here is relatively independent because the teacher is the one who is destined or who is assigned the duty of imparting knowledge. So that makes the teacher an independent variable, because he or she is responsible for the performance and participation of the dependent variable, who is the student here. So the teacher is the one who plans, organizes, leads, and to some extent controls the dependent variables. Therefore, they also have a functional aspect to their role. So the teacher is also a variable, but here an independent variable, because the teacher is responsible for the participation and performance of the student. And therefore, he or she plans, organizes, leads, and also controls the dependent variables. So they are also having a functional role. They are also in the loop of action. The action here is the process of teaching. So the teacher is also a part of the loop, and therefore the teacher is also a functional aspect in the process of teaching. Now the third variable is the intervening variable. So what do you mean by an intervening variable? To intervene means to come in between or to interfere. So anything that facilitates the interaction between the teacher and the student can be called an intervening variable. Example, the content, the methods of delivery, the techniques, the strategies, the environment of teaching, etc. So the teacher-student relationship or the classroom, the teaching process is not just between the teacher and the student. Like I mentioned in the first slide, there is this very important element that is called the content. So the content and how it is delivered, the techniques used in delivering the content, strategies used by the teacher, the whole environment where the teaching happens, all these are aspects which facilitate the interaction between the teacher and the student. Therefore, all of this can be called as intervening variables because they intervene and they make a contribution in facilitating the interaction between the teacher and the student. They make interaction between the teacher and the student easier. So, about techniques, strategies, environment of teaching, etc. I hope things. Yeah, I hope it's okay. So shall I carry on? Okay, all right. So objectives of teaching from different points of view. So we talked about the different objectives of teaching. So here there is a subtopic that comes under the objectives of teaching. I've never seen questions come from this area, but I'll just brush up this point so that you can keep the points in your mind. That's all is needed here. So objectives of teaching can be different people or different factors who are involved in the teaching process. So from the point of view of the teacher, what could be the objectives of teaching? One is to enrich the learner's knowledge and wisdom. These points are not there in the slide, but you can just listen to them because these are not very important, but then you can just keep a note of them in your mind. So from the perspective, an objective of teaching would be to enrich the learner's knowledge, to students, inside a sense of independence among students. The students should learn among the society. So that overall holistic development. The learner benefits from teaching and they gain doubtless knowledge. Subject matter. Also, the trends in the educational system. That is again very, very important. Even if it's from the teacher's point of view or the learner's point of view, to keep up with the trends in the education system is a very important aspect. Now, from the school's point of view, the school should provide, the school or be it any educational institution, they have to provide a healthy and positive learning culture that facilitates learning for the students. And they should also reach academic and co-curricular activities. They have to ensure that these activities take place in the school. So the infrastructure and also providing academic and co-curricular activities. These are the functions or the objectives of teaching from point of view of the school. Then from the parents' point of view, they need to be updated about their child's progress and they should have a full involvement in the teaching process. And also they should try and create a conducive environment for the child. That is a very important aspect because we can see that in many families or in many familial atmospheres, there are different issues happening or there are unfavorable circumstances which could affect the education of the child. So from the parents' point of view, the objective of teaching their child, one of the objectives of teaching their child should be to provide a conducive, favorable environment for the child to study. Now, lastly, from the society's point of view, the society has an intention to make more people literate so that it becomes developed in a larger sense. So to make people literate is one of their aims, and to make the learning process easier by providing or facilitating whatever that is necessary for the younger generation to learn and come out well. So these are the aspects when it comes to the society. So moving on. Now we are moving on to the learning aspect of things. Now we talked about teaching so far. Now we'll move on to the characteristics of learning. So what is learning? Learning is a process of acquiring new knowledge, skill, behavior, attitude, and preferences, which occurs as a result of experiences and enhances the potential for better performance and future learning. So what are the key aspects that comes in learning? When we learn something, we are actually acquiring new knowledge and we are actually acquiring new skill, behavior, and attitude. So we have a particular nature. We are students, we are individuals, and we have our own nature, our behavior, attitude, everything. But learning something or the process of learning helps us mold ourselves and helps us improve whatever knowledge bases we have, whatever skills we have, and whatever behavior and attitude and preferences that we have. So one of the key aspects of learning is acquiring all these things: the knowledge, skill, behavior, attitude, and preferences. So how does this learning happen? Is it just by the process where the teacher and student interact? No, it's also a result of so many experiences that take place in the learning atmosphere, which could be our classroom, our school, or even the children's park, or even any other extracurricular activities that we engage in. So all these can contribute towards us gaining new knowledge, skill, behavior, attitude, and preferences. And these could all be considered as the experiences that come to us as learners. And ultimately, this should enhance the potential for better performance and future learning. So that's also an important aspect. So learning should teach us how to learn things in the future. Is it clear? Like how we should be equipped to learn future things as well. Because in every stage of our life, we'll be developing from being a kindergarten student, we reach the high school, we reach higher education. So at every level, the level of learning is also increasing. So we should also be equipped for better performance at each levels of learning. each future levels of learning. So these are the basic process of learning and how these steps are to be followed when it's learned. Then it should bring about a change in behavior, and it should be something which constitutes of experiencing and practicing the knowledge that we. If we just simply learn something and if we practice it, it will not make any difference in our knowledge base. For example, we learn driving, for instance. We have a driving license, but if we do not practice driving, if we do not take out the vehicle and go and practice it, then the knowledge would be of no use. So it is about experiencing, and as most importantly, it's about practicing. Then it's also about exposure to new knowledge, and therefore it is continuous. Like I mentioned before, learning is also a very continuous process, because every day, on an everyday basis, we are exposed to new amounts and new types and new kinds of knowledge. Especially now with at our hands, with the resources that we have now, we are like even the slightest doubts that we have on a subject could be cleared in seconds. So in that context, when we are exposed to a lot of knowledge, it has to be a very continuous process, a very systematic one as well. We should keep a track of how we are learning things and how systematic it is and how it is contributing to our overall development. Then learning is again a very universal process, because it doesn't end, it doesn't just begin and end with the individual. We are starting to learn something and we are contributing something to the society. So it's a very universal process, and it is intended at the growth and development at an individual as well as collective level. Because like I mentioned earlier, we go out into the society and we try to make changes in the society. We talk to people and we share our knowledge. So all these can make change at the collective level. To the individual development that we are getting through learning, it can have a very serious impact and a very positive impact at the collective level as well. Next point, active and ever-evolving process, which as I mentioned earlier, in the case of teaching, learning also is a very dynamic process, or it's an active and it's an ever-evolving process. It keeps on adding new knowledge bases and adding more, we learn things. Also something which is important. We learn certain things at some point. Learning can also happen from one's surrounding environments. So like I mentioned, it's also about the experiences that we get from our environments. It need not necessarily be whatever that is being taught or that is ready information. It can also come from one's surrounding environments and the slightest day-to-day activities. So these are the nature and characteristics of learning. Moving on, we have the objectives of learning. Before that, just a second. Is it okay? I mean, should I adjust my pace or something? I just wanted to ask. You can just drop a text in the message box. If this is fine, I'll go on.
Ma'am, your voice is not clear.
Yeah.
Breaking.
Oh, it is breaking. Oh, okay. What about now? Is it clear now?
Now it's clear, but sometimes it's breaking.
Oh, all right. Okay. Can you just tell me when it is breaking? Because I'm looking at the PowerPoint, so I might not be able to see the messages. Risha, would you just let me know when it's breaking next time?
Okay, ma'am. I'll let you know.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So we'll continue. Yeah, so that's about the objectives of learning. One of the primary objectives of learning is to bring about an ideal or a positive change, which is intended to be long-term. So we learn a particular concept now. For instance, we are learning about teaching aptitude now. So it is not just meant to, just learn the facts and keep it aside. These things are supposed to bring about positive changes in long-term in our lives. So that is an ideal positive change to be brought about in the long term. That is one objective of learning. Secondly, it's a transferable process. So what do you mean by transferable? Knowledge is intended to be shared. That is the meaning that we intend when we tell that it is a transferable process. I learn something and I share it with you. You share it with your friend, or you share it with somebody else who is near you, or you share it on a larger scale. When you come out into society, you should share it with the people in the society. So it becomes a very transferable process. We learn something and we transfer the knowledge to other people. Thirdly, it helps to work on the existing knowledge bases. That's a very important aspect, because we all have our prejudices and our stereotypes about certain concepts and everything. We all have our opinions about certain aspects of knowledge that we have gained. We might have gained some knowledge from our families. We might have gained some knowledge from the classrooms, and we might know some things which our friends have told us. So we have a large repository of knowledge in our mind. So we need to work on this existing knowledge basis. So these are all the things that we know beforehand, and through learning, through gradual and processual learning, where a constant evolving of character takes place, we can work on these existing knowledge bases so that our opinions do not become biased, or so that we are not less aware about the things that are happening around. So the learning helps to work on existing knowledge bases. Another point is that it helps the learner to become problem solvers and independent individuals. So ultimately, what is the point of learning so many things, and what is the point of knowledge actually? It has to be practical, or it has to help us in our lives, in the day-to-day situations that we'll deal with. So learning helps us become problem solvers and become independent individuals. So ideal positive changes for which are long-term. Learning is a transferable process where we share knowledge. Learning helps to work on existing knowledge bases and helps the learner become problem solvers. And finally, it helps us attain deep knowledge on the subjects that are learned. Okay, so these are the key terms: positive changes, transferable process, works on existing knowledge bases, problem solvers, and helps attain deep knowledge. Now coming to the teaching learning process. Now we talked about the teaching process and the learning process. Now we look at the integration of the teaching learning process, which happens inside the classroom. So here there is a teacher, there is a learner, and there is a content that is being shared. Now the first point or the first factor which affects the teaching learning process is the learning climate. The learning climate refers to the place or the space where the teaching learning takes place. So if it were in the olden days, we can say that we know the practice of Gurukula learning, right? That's where we have a teacher and the pupils would be sitting around the teacher under a banyan tree. You know, we all have that image, right? So that is a learning climate. That's a place or space where learning takes place. So in the current scenario, we can say that it's either online platforms or is the online classroom. So the learning climate affects the teacher learning process. The teacher needs to understand that there are several factors which play a role when it comes to a learning climate. It's not just the physical atmosphere or the chair or the materials that are there in the classroom, but there's another important factor: cross-cultural differences. Cross-cultural differences when it comes to the classroom. It refers to the dynamic, the diversity of the students in the classroom. So a classroom may have students who come from very, very different backgrounds. So a teacher, first of all, needs to understand the nature of the classroom, which is the learning climate, and how different cultures or how students who come from different backgrounds are accommodated into that space. And the teacher should understand that he or she needs to be very accommodative before beginning the process. Another aspect is the teacher should promote learning in the teaching learning process in association with the learning climate. And the teacher should also value and reward the positive developments of the students. That's also very, very important, because we can see that, especially in the recent times, we have come across a lot of news. We have seen a lot of people, a lot of teachers mistreating their students. Even recently, I remember a video that was being shared on social media where a teacher was unnecessarily beating up a student because he belonged to a particular section in the society, and the teacher was asking other students to come and beat him up, and mistreatment. That was total mistreatment, and that is not something which is expected become a proper teaching space. So there, the teacher actually lacked the kind of sentiments or the ability to accommodate the cross-cultural differences that was happening or that was there in the classroom. So this is a very important process when it comes to important aspect when it comes to the teacher learning process. Then the students, when it comes to the students, they should cooperate in collaborative learning. Active participation should be there from their side for maximum results. So the teacher should be taking care of all these points. He or she has to be accommodative and promote self-learning and also value and reward the positive developments of the students. He or she should appreciate the students for the positive developments that are happening to them. And at the same time, from the student's point of view, for the learning climate to be conducive or for the learning climate to have maximum results, the students should cooperate in collaborative learning and active participation in the classroom for maximum results. So these are the factors which are needed to create a favorable learning climate. Another aspect is classroom assessment. So now we talked about the climate. The climate is set. Now the teacher and learner, they know what all are to be done to make a teaching climate favorable. Now, secondly, we have the classroom assessment. So a feedback system is very important when it comes to the student and teacher. So the teacher should know whatever is happening with the student in terms of learning, and the student should also have an opportunity to provide to the teacher. If he or she is not understanding particular concepts, or if he or she feels that the teacher is not imparting the knowledge properly, then the student also should have a provision to communicate this with the teacher. So that sort of a mutual feedback system is very necessary. As teachers, they should use updated technology, diverse methods to assess students, provide regular feedback, encourage peer engagement, that is engagement between friends, classmates, and they should also be mindful of student requirements. So like I mentioned earlier, there could be different students in the classroom. So it is very important that a teacher be mindful of the diversity of the classroom and of what each individual student requires from the topic being taught. So updated technology, diverse methods to assess the students, regular feedback mechanism, encouragement of peer engagement, and being mindful of student requirements. These are key aspects when it comes to an assessment that takes place in the classroom. And then as students, they should also participate in the feedback, and they should work on the feedback that are being given to them, and they should keep a check on self-development, because our development is best tracked by ourselves, right? We know that we are now at a point, we have gone through a lot of things, we have studied a lot of things, and we have reached this point through gradual development. So it is very imperative that the student keeps a track of their own self-development so that they can keep on improving at every stage in their teaching life, learning life. Then they should also make necessary adjustments whenever required, because it's a classroom setting, and therefore everything that comes in a classroom setting is not entirely personal, or it's not entirely individual. It's actually a community, and therefore the students should also keep in mind that the necessary adjustments are to be maintained whenever required. Now, another point is instructional relevance. How useful is the information given? So we cannot really, a teacher should be mindful of the information that he or she is providing in the class. The information should be relevant to the topic that is being discussed. So as teachers, attention needs to be given to students' past knowledge and experiences. The teacher should know where the students stand, what is their prior knowledge. If somebody comes into your class and directly, if they talk about very deep subjects, before teaching you the or before teaching us the basics of it, then it would be of no use. So the teacher should know that, should know where to begin and how it should be structured and how effective it should be made. So attention should be given to students' past knowledge and experiences. Then use of technology. A teacher should be well versed in the use of technology. Then teacher should be able to add real life situations as examples in teaching. Because as I've mentioned before, the student comes out into society, and if something has to be made applicable, the knowledge that has been learned, if it has to be made applicable, then real life examples should be given so that the student understands a topic clearly. Then the teachers should ensure student participation in novel, empowering activities. So there could be different activities that could be brought about by the student, by the teacher, so that the student participation is maximum. Because it's only when we actively engage in something that learning can take. Now, the last point is the knowledge of content. So everything is there. That is the student's skill, sorry, the teacher's skill, the learner's past knowledge, all these aspects are there. And along with that, the knowledge of content is also very important. As I mentioned before, the basics or the fundamentals need to be clear from the student's point of view so that they can assimilate more knowledge which are difficult and which are in-depth in relation to that subject. So the basics needs to be clear. And as for the teacher, the topic knowledge needs to be deep so that it can be effectively transferred. Overall, the teaching learning process should impart a kind of knowledge that would enable the student or learner to connect different domains of knowledge and make assessments of the world for themselves. So what do you mean by that? It's not just about learning the particular topic that is being taught. The overall process of teaching learning should impart a kind of knowledge that would help the student to connect different elements. If you learn about some topic, the student should be able to connect it with something else. And the student should also be able to make their own opinions about the world. So that is the ultimate intention of a proper teaching learning process. Now, coming to the factors affecting teaching and learning. So all these points, we would be very familiar with these points, but it's just that we have to keep reminding ourselves about these points so that when a particular question comes, we can suddenly remember the key words or the key terms that are associated with teaching and learning. So the factors affecting teaching and learning are, first of all, when it comes to teaching, the knowledge of the subject matter, the knowledge of learners, the teaching skills, educational qualifications, experience, personality and attitude, discipline, and mental health. So in these points, I've already dealt with the subject matter, knowledge of learners, teaching skills, and all that. The experience, personality, and attitude, that is also very important when it comes to teaching. So if a teacher comes and teaches you something and just leaves as if he or she doesn't care about the impact that is happening with the teaching, then that attitude is not favorable for an effective teaching. So the attitude of the teacher, the personality of the teacher, and the kind and compassionate attitude or the nature of the teacher is also very important. And it's also important that the teacher maintains a certain level of discipline, because he or she cannot just discard any order and just take the class as such, because any imparting of knowledge would require a certain order to it or a certain system to it. So that comes with a level of discipline. So these are some of the factors which could affect the teaching process. Now, the learning process, the factors which affect the learning process are motivation, intelligence, prior learning, attention and interest, goal setting, and aspiration. So all these are related terms. It would be very familiar also. So we should be motivated, first of all. For example, you are here listening to the session because you're motivated to perform well in the exam that is coming up. So that kind of a motivation should be there so that effective learning takes place. And intelligence is the factor. Prior learning or prior knowledge that we have is a factor. The attention and interest that we have in the subject is a factor. And finally, what aspiration or what goals are we aiming at is also a very important factor, which would affect our learning and which would decide if we have learned something or not. Another aspect is the subject matter. So the difficulty level of the subject, the length of the matter, whatever meaning is being conveyed through the content, and the relevance of the content is also important. Another aspect is regarding the methods of teaching and environment. The task-based learning, stability of methods, all these are methods that could be used to enhance the teaching environment conduciveness. So how much environment is made conducive towards learning or teaching is also a very important factor which affects the process. Now, next is the institution. So if there is proper infrastructure or proper facilities, all these things would impact the depth in which we can learn something. Right. So the teacher-student proportion, the teacher-student commitment, vision of the institute, the administration, the management. We all must be familiar with at least whatever is happening in my university. I'm very familiar with that. The administration, management, and everything, how things are happening. So all these things are very, very important when it comes to the process of teaching and learning. Then lastly, the teaching competence. So what do you mean by teaching competence? The level of competence that the teacher has, and this is affected by socioeconomic factors, attitude, and personality. The investment that a teacher can give in the process of teaching will depend upon his or her background, where she is coming from, his or her family situations, or his social factors, their attitude, and their personality. So that is also one factor which will be very key in determining whether the learning takes place effectively. So knowledge, subject matter, motivation, difficulty level of the subject, the methods of teaching and environment, the infrastructure when it comes to the institution, and also the teaching competence. These are the factors which affect teaching and learning. Now, this is a short note. This is about micro teaching. So micro teaching is a term which has come up in the syllabus. So it's just a note, so that if a question comes about what is micro teaching, you can just answer it this way. Micro teaching is a process that is intended to provide concrete knowledge on a specific topic and small amount of material done for a specific duration of time. So what happens in micro teaching? You take up a particular topic, and that particular topic is being taught to the learner in a very in-depth manner in a very short duration of time. So maybe you assign a particular time, and then you the teacher teaches that particular topic so that that is understood completely. So that is referred to as micro teaching. So what is the benefit of micro teaching? Rather than going teaching large chunks of material for a particular duration of time, if we focus on this small amount of material, it will help in retention of the material in the students. So it will help the amount of data to be retained effectively. It will help in that effectiveness. So that is what micro teaching intends to do. It's breaking down lessons into small parts for easy comprehension, so that it doesn't appear to be huge data or too much to handle. So micro teaching helps in enabling the student to learn things part by part, and it helps in easy comprehension. So just keep the term in mind, micro teaching. Moving on, we have teaching methods. So teaching methods comprises of the techniques and activities which are used to make teaching effective. It helps students understand the content better and apply them later. So every teacher will have a method, right? Like I mentioned before, it has to be ordered, systematic, and it has to be working in a particular manner so that effectively the content is being transferred. So for that, we need to follow a particular method. The learner also will have methods to follow. Similarly, the teacher will have teaching methods so that learning is made effective. The choice of methods depend on the content to be taught, use of teaching aids, teacher's understanding of the classroom atmosphere, flexibility of the teacher, class strength, assessment, and evaluation. So these are the factors which affect the teaching methods. The content, whatever aids or whatever tools are being used, and how the teacher understands the classroom atmosphere, that is how much the teacher knows the students, then the flexibility of the teacher, the number of students in the class, and the assessment and the evaluation patterns. So look at the methods. So teaching methods could be teacher-centered as well as learner-centered. So like the term suggests, teacher-centered methods are basically those methods in which the teacher has a more involvement than the learner. The teacher has more involvement in teacher-centered methods than the learner. So we'll look at which are the teacher-centered methods. First one is, you're all very familiar with it, the lecture method. So what happens in the lecture method? The lesson is explained orally. The student will take notes. The effectiveness of this depends on the language capabilities of the teacher. This is the positive aspects of the lecture method, is that it is highly economical because it's just an interaction that takes place wherein the topic is discussed and notes are being taken. It's very planned and systematic. But certain disadvantages of lecture method is that there is minimum student involvement. It is not necessary that the student gets involved in a lecture method unless a discussion takes place. And again, personal approach is lacking, and it is very difficult to hold the attention of students. So when it comes to all topics, lecture method is not really favored. But this is the method that is conventionally used in teaching. But nowadays, we can see that a lot of other methods are also integrated into the lecture method so that the classes become interesting. Another method is Team teaching. So team teaching, I'm not sure if you have been able to experience team teaching. I have had that at some point in my school. So what happens in team teaching is that 2 or more teachers will plan their class and they'll come and take the class together. So what happens here is it becomes very interactive because mostly the teachers would be taking different subjects, but they'll find a way to integrate the subject and make it very interesting. So the benefit is that the student will get expertise of both the teachers and a very interdisciplinary learning. They'll be able to learn 2 subjects in a merged manner. And also because of the interaction that is happening there, the information would be retained better as well. So that is team teaching. But a restriction or a limitation of team teaching is that the faculty should be available. Possible faculties should be available, and also there should be agreements between them. If that is there, then team teaching is a very effective teacher-centered method. Then TV and video presentations. There is, as it is very clear, the visuals when it comes in teaching methods, it cultivates interest and it helps retain the information better. For instance, we have the PowerPoints and when we have images, it helps us retain the information better. But one of the disadvantages is that it is very much relying on the internet facilities and other technical aspects, and it can also be expensive. But when it comes to the effectiveness of TV and video presentations, doubtless it is very effective when it comes to learning. Now, learner-centered methods. So we looked at the teacher-centered methods, lecture method, team teaching, and video and TV presentations. Now we'll come to the learner-centered methods. So learner-centered methods are particularly aimed at increasing the participation of the learner. So here the learner would be more involved in the teaching process. So that's what happens in most of the higher education institutions. As we can see, some of you might already be doing their courses, and we can also see that when it comes to higher education institutions, what happens there is the teacher only guides the students, right? So the learning actually happens from the student's side, and more effort or more involvement happens from the student's side, because the pattern of learning or teaching is such that they enable us to become independent and help us in self-learning. So that is, these are the methods which come under learner-centered methods, wherein the learner is having more role in the process of teaching. So first one is heuristic method. So in teaching aptitude, you can see that there are here and there we'll find some names which we may not be familiar, but then it's better to just by heart these names. There are not many names, but then there are certain theorists who have proposed certain concepts. So it's better to remember those names. So heuristic method is something which is proposed by Armstrong. And here the Greek word heuristic, which means to find, is applied here to refer to a learning that is through experience rather than teaching. So here what happens in a heuristic method is that, like I mentioned before, self-learning is promoted and the student or the learner is encouraged to think for themselves, and methods of self-study are introduced. The teachers only guide the students here, and for example, learning a theory through an experiment could be one of the heuristic methods. So a theory is not taught as a theory, but then an experiment is done to make the students understand the theory. So such methods are referred to as heuristic methods, which promote self-study. All right. The second topic is flipped classroom method. So what do you mean by flipped classroom method? Flipped classroom method refers to a sort of teaching where the teachers record their lectures and give them for future reference and then complete assignments. So what happens here is that there is very less pressure when it comes to flipped classroom method, because the lectures would be recorded and the lectures would be given for the students, and the feedback that is expected is through assignments. So the students can work on their own pace and it is more friendly. Those are the benefits of the flipped classroom method, but disadvantage is that accessibility to technology is very crucial. So if some student cannot access technology properly, then the flipped classroom method would become ineffective. Third method is assignments method. I've not explained it here because it's clear. Assignments method is something wherein assignments are given to the learner and the learner is expected to do them and submit their work. So that is assignment. Then comes the case study method. In a case study method, a teacher gives real life situations and the student has to study that and present their views. So what is the benefit It's not just learning something and then writing something on it or writing an essay. It's not just a mere reproduction of knowledge. A real life situation is provided to the student, and the students will study that and will present their views. So this helps in critical thinking and development of a practical approach. But a limitation that happens here is the teacher should have in-depth knowledge, because the teacher should be able to deal with the doubts that the students come up with in relation to the case study. And this cannot be applied to short-term courses. So because this involves a very long-term benefit. So that is a case study method. Another is programmed instructions. So what happens in programmed instruction is that a pre-prepared material would be present, and it is given to the student to be worked on by themselves. For example, we can see that MCQ tests sometimes that takes place in our classes, especially in online learning. We can see that MCQ tests would be given, and immediate feedback is also given. So the test would be pre-prepared, and after a topic is taught, the test would be given, and then immediate feedback is also provided. So that is another very effective means of method, learner-centered method. Now, another one is project method, which is similar to the assignments method. Here the students are asked to present a working model, a structure, or a report extensive research, and the involvement students is there, but it is time consuming. So this is a very effective way to learn, because the student can work on a particular topic, and there is extensive work that is done by the student, because a particular working model or a structure needs to be presented, or even a report needs to be read out. So for that to happen, the student has to do a lot of homework. So in that way, the subject becomes very clear for the student. Again, this is why it becomes a learner-centered approach, because as I mentioned earlier, here the learner is the one who is having an active involvement in the process of teaching learning. Another is open learning. Open learning is whatever we are doing currently comes under open learning, because we have a lot of resources now wherein anybody can access any amount of knowledge, any kind of knowledge, and anybody can actually learn anything. So that the open learning platforms allow anyone to learn anything from anywhere at their own convenience. So see, this their own convenience part is actually very important, because in this current scenario, people, I mean, they are the pace of life is increasing day by day. So in that context, the open learning platforms are very effective ways in which people can learn by themselves and on their own pace. So that accessibility is very much when it comes to open learning, and it's also very flexible. But one of the disadvantages of open learning is that without a particular system or a structure, people can the subject that is at hand. The last point is peer learning. Peer learning refers to the sharing of ideas amongst friends or amongst classmates, and the discussions that happen through the sharing of content. So it's not just the teacher and the learner. The learners themselves can share ideas among themselves, because there could be a lot of information that can be gained through peer learning. Because like we say, for example, in my case, when I was preparing for entrance exams for my MA or even PhD, the combined study methods has helped me a lot. Because we would share material, we would each have our own material, study materials, and then we would sit together, we would share those materials, and we would talk about it among themselves, we would teach each other. So everything comes under peer learning. So these discussions help us retain information more. Now, mixed methods, again, I'm just mentioning the mixed methods here, which are similar to peer learning. Then importance of these methods is that one is the systematic comprehension of the content. We understand the content in a very systematic manner if these learner-centered methods are approached or taken care of. And the practical applications of theories could be made clear, and a very focused learning could be attempted. And it also helps the teacher to evaluate the suitability of methods for future reference, because the teacher can actually experiment with different methods, and the teacher can assess which would be favorable and which would be not. So that's about the teaching methods. Now we are coming to teaching aids. Teaching aids is a very simple area. because we are all familiar with the kinds of teaching aids that are being used in classrooms. So what are teaching aids or teaching tools? They are used to make teaching more effective, entertaining, and useful. They help retain the subject well and for a longer time. They improve the reading skills of the students and they help develop new ones. As you can see in the image, flashcards, projectors, chalk and blackboard, then discs and other objects that can be used for display. All these are some of the teaching aids that can be used in order to make teaching effective. You might also have had these experiments in school wherein we were asked to make cutouts of things and we were asked to make scrapbooks. For example, in social studies, when we study about the geography of places or about the culture of different places, we were asked to cutouts or images of the dance forms or the art forms that are happening in that place. So we would make a collection of that, and those are all different teaching aids that the teacher uses to make the class or the teaching more effective. So there could be visual aids, for example, actual objects, pictures, charts, models, bulletin board, chalkboard, overhead projector, flashcards, maps, mind maps, etc. So mind maps are useful at any stage of learning. I would say that it is useful at any stage of learning, even in the higher levels of education, because they are really very effective in retaining the information that we learn. Then audio aids, which use the sense of hearing, like radio, tape recorder, etc. Audio visual aids, which are film projectors, television, film strips, etc. So the benefits that come from using these teaching aids are the motivation of the student gets increased and the concepts get cleared. So there is clarification and the material is properly laid out. We are able to experience the things, or we are able to visually and engage with the objects that are being taught about. And then there are live and active classrooms. The classrooms never become boring, and there is a direct experience of the things and also more participation. So this is why teachers make use of different teaching aids, which are visual, audio, and audiovisual. Now coming to the evaluation methods. So till now we talked about the teaching learning process. So now after learning, what happens? The teacher should know, or the learner should also know what all has been the outcome of that teacher learning process. So for that, evaluation methods are used. Evaluation is a very important aspect of teaching learning process, and it's the final or the crucial aspect of teaching learning process. So they test and validate the effectiveness of the teaching learning process and the whole system. So the teacher cannot simply teach and then leave, and the learner also cannot simply learn something, mug up things and then leave. Both of them should be made aware of the changes that have happened through the teaching learning process that has happened. So for this, proper evaluation is needed. So here I'll look into a definition. So this is a definition given by Tuckman. The evaluation system is defined as follows. I'll read out. Evaluation is a process wherein the parts, process, or outcomes of the program are examined to see whether they are satisfactory, particularly with reference to the program's stated objectives of our own standards of excellence. So you don't have to by heart the definition, but what he says is that evaluation is a process where the different methods, the parts, the programs, the process, or the outcomes of the program are examined. So after the end of a teaching learning program, the outcome of it is examined to evaluate or to know whether there has been a satisfactory development for the teacher as well as the learner. So that is what an evaluation method tries to do. Now, there are 5 elements when it comes to the evaluation system: the audience, the purpose, the questions, and the scope, which are all intended at evaluating or examining the outcome of the teaching learning process. So the characteristics of evaluation methods are, it should be comprehensive. So it shouldn't just be like somebody going and asking a learner randomly if the teaching has been effective. That's not how it's supposed to be, or a random test that is done. It should be very comprehensive. It should cover all aspects of the child's education. So like we mentioned earlier, the education of a child is not just about learning from the books. It has different other factors as well, which include the overall behavioral development of the child. So an evaluation should assess if the child has undergone an overall development. So that's why it is supposed to be comprehensive. It should cover everything. It should be continuous. An evaluation shouldn't have at the end point of the teaching learning process. It should be happening at every stage of the teaching learning process, so that the teacher can also improve according to the development that is happening in the learner. It should be systematic. Driven, it should be valid and reliable. I'm not explaining each of the terms because they are very clear. You just have to remember the terms that are associated with the characteristics of evaluation methods. It should be valid, reliable, systematic. There should be proper feedback, effective use of technology, and it should be driven by proper collection of data. Like I mentioned before, it should happen in a continuous manner. Now, coming to the objectives of evaluation, the objective is to maintain the overall quality of the curriculum and teaching methods. So when we look at it from a larger perspective, why do we have to evaluate the teaching learning process? Because it is necessary to maintain the quality of the curriculum. So if the curriculum is outdated, or if the topics that are being taught, or if the modes of teaching are outdated, then it wouldn't lead to any development in the learner. Right. So to maintain the quality of the curriculum and the teaching methods, there should be a very processual and a very systematic review of the teaching methods. That is what the evaluation does. So it produces educationally well-equipped citizens, and on a larger picture, it promotes progress and change. So a particular at particular intervals, these revisions should be conducted. These methods should be evaluated, so that on a larger picture, it promotes progress and change. Now, the evaluation process. First of all, the objectives of evaluation should be set, and the syllabus to be taught needs to be selected, and there should be a suitable learning. There should be planning of suitable learning activities, and there should be evaluation of these activities, and the results should be used as feedback. So the whole process is very expansive, and it has to be very comprehensive as well. The objectives need to be set. What all are we expecting out of this evaluation, or what should be the outcome of a particular imparting of knowledge? So that should also be the primary agenda when we come towards evaluating a particular teaching learning process. So these are the characteristics, objectives, and process of evaluation methods. Now, the different types of evaluation. We have 6 types of evaluation here. This also, we need not go deep into the understanding or the definition of the processes, the types. But then questions are asked from this area, so that we need to know all the terms and what they refer to. First of all, the placement evaluation. So what do we mean by placement evaluation? The placement evaluation determines or decides the position of the pupil in the instructional series through aptitude tests, observational methods, entrance exams, etc. So what do we mean by placement evaluation? It helps to place a particular student in a particular position in the classroom. So we know students range from, the capabilities or the way they perform differs, right? So the particular position of the student in a class is determined through placement evaluation, so that he or she can be helped in the right manner. So placing the right person in the right position through, how can this be done? Entrance exams, observational methods, aptitude tests, everything are the kind of evaluation wherein we are given particular ranks or positions. Now we know in entrance exams, our selection is dependent upon the rank that we get in the entrance exam. So that is called placement evaluation. Secondly, formative evaluation. Formative evaluation examines the learner's progress in the learning system. Continuous and constructive feedback is provided, and a day-to-day monitoring of the student is carried out. So formative evaluation is the most crucial evaluation method because it assesses the students on a daily basis. Now in school, you might remember, we'll be graded for even small activities, right? Even small class tests, monthly tests, and there used to be this phenomenon called surprise tests. I know you all would be familiar with that. We wouldn't be intimated prior to the test. The teacher would just come in and then conduct a surprise test. So all these are part of formative evaluation because there needs to be a continuous tracking of the development of the student or the progress of the student. So that comes under formative evaluation. Third one is diagnostic evaluation. So what do you mean by diagnosing something? To finding out something, right? So diagnosing or to finding out what is happening, or making a judgment about what is happening, diagnosing a certain thing. So diagnostic evaluation examines the learner's learning difficulties, and based on that, remedial actions are offered to the learner. So that must also have happened when we were in school. There used to be remedial classes wherein if somebody is not able to understand a particular topic properly, they'll be given remedial classes or remedial tutoring would be given. So that is based on the diagnosis that the learner has a particular learning difficulty and it needs to be rectified. So remedial actions are offered based on diagnostic evaluation. And underlying cause of issues are also looked into. The issues could also be outside the learning atmosphere. The student might be having other issues. So the teacher would be evaluating or diagnosing the issues of the student and would be taking necessary action. So that is diagnostic evaluation. Fourth one is summative evaluation. Summative evaluation is what happens at the end of a course, and we exams or we submit assignments and we'll be assigned grades. So that is summative evaluation. It happens at the end of the course. It is the determining point, that is the semester end exams or the semester end assignments would come under the summative evaluation. Next is norm-referenced evaluation. This is something which we may not be much familiar with. So norm-referenced evaluation is something which refers to the kind of evaluation that takes place when learner's version is likened to that of others in the group. That means if I am writing a particular exam, my position in that exam or in the my performance in that exam would be assessed based on how others have also performed in the exam. So the results that are declared in these tests are on a percentile basis. So it is happening on a comparative basis. So currently, even the NET exams happen in this manner, or the assessment is done in this manner. It happens on a comparative basis, and the assessment is done through percentiles. So all public examinations are norm-referenced evaluations. On the predefined criterion set or selected already. We can simply know this evaluation system with the help of the requirements noted for arising for appearing for the UGC NET exam. So criterion referenced evaluation refers to there will be a certain predefined criterion based on which we would be assessed. So there are certain points, certain key points, and if we are suitable to that, or if our performance adheres to that points, then we'll be evaluated accordingly. So that is what is called by criterion referenced evaluation. So there are 6 types of evaluation methods: placement evaluation, formative evaluation, diagnostic evaluation, summative evaluation, norm referenced evaluation, and criterion referenced evaluation. Now, coming to the last aspect of the PowerPoint of the class, there are certain key areas which I have not dealt with in detail. Then I have come across these terms in the past question papers. So maybe you can just note them down and then refer to them later. So first one is Bloom's taxonomy. So Benjamin Bloom, theorist, he developed a sort of method to classify the learning stages of the learner. So according to him, there are these learning stages that happen in the process of learning for a learner. So they are: first stage is remembering, second stage is understanding, third applying, fourth analyzing, fifth evaluating, and sixth creating. So first of all, there is a remembering that is happening, a recalling, then understanding of the concept, applying the concept, analyzing the concept, evaluating the possible sides of the concept, and then creating their own revised versions of the concept. So these are the learning stages of the learner according to Benjamin Bloom. You don't have to go deep into the learning stages, but you have to know that it is called Bloom's taxonomy, and it was found by Benjamin Bloom. Now, levels of teaching. There are 3 levels of teaching. This is also an area from where I found questions. So in teaching, there are 3 levels, right? The first level is the memory level of teaching, and it was first of all put forward by a person called Herbert, and it is called the initial level, and it forms the foundation of teaching. So what happens at the memory level of teaching? The focus of the teacher is to help the student memorize the facts and provide information in such a way that the information is grasped as such. There is no in-depth thinking involved at the memory level. So the only intention is to memorize the facts and information, and the attempt is rote learning, and also the teachers are at the primary position. When it comes to memory level of learning, the teacher has a primary position and an upper hand, because the facts are provided and but this stage is important because it lays the foundation for the subsequent stages to come. If only the student knows the facts, then only they can work on it when it comes to the understanding and the reflective levels of learning. So memory level of teaching is the first level of teaching. Second level is understanding level. This was put forward by someone called Morrison, and it is an extension of memory level, which means that in the understanding level, all the facts and the basic subject knowledge that has been garnered, that would be put into a more understanding state, or the subject would be more dealt with in a deep manner, and an understanding of the subject is aimed at. The students would intend to get a mastery over the subject and not just a basic learning. So based on the facts that are learned through at the memory level, the student will try to understand the concept better and attain mastery on the subject at the understanding level. So here and they develop intellectual behavior. They develop this pattern of intellectual behavior by trying to understand the concept. All right. So that happens to the second level. Now, the third level is the most important level when it comes to learning. And this was put forward by Hunt. And it's the highest level. And it makes use of research and knowledge skills of the learner. And what happens is that at memory level, the facts are learned. At understanding level, the concept is such a way that he or she can solve real life problems, and they can develop their creative skills, they can put their research mind to use, and also they can become open and independent thinkers. Then here the learner is at the primary position. So in the three processes, that is the memory, understanding, and reflective level, you can see that there is a progression of teaching. In the first level, the teacher is at the primary position because the teacher imparts the knowledge and the learner just takes up the knowledge. That is the only process that is happening. In the second level, there is an equal role. The teacher has to teach the concepts in detail, and therefore the teacher is important, and the learner has to dive deep into the subject. So the learner also becomes important. And when it comes to the third stage, the learner comes at the primary position because the learner has to put the knowledge that he or she has garnered into practical use. And we should also develop the learning and thinking skills. So these are the levels of teaching. So we looked at Bloom's taxonomy and the remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and stages of learning. Then the three levels of teaching, that is memory, understanding, and reflective level. Now, the last part is the domains of learning. There are mainly three domains of learning. This too, you wouldn't have to go deep into this area. I'm just mentioning this so that the terms can be memorized. So the first domain of learning is cognitive domain. And the cognitive domain, in the term cognition actually deals with anything that is related to the process of knowing something or perceiving something. So everything like memory, judgment, perception, knowledge, everything belongs to the cognitive domain. So it comprises 6 subcategories, which are namely knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Here, knowledge, comprehension, and application involve low-order thinking skills, and the other 3, that is analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, involve higher-order thinking skills. So it is a combination of these orders of thinking skills that make up the cognitive domain of learning. So simply put, the cognitive domain is related to anything that is connected with thinking, analysis, and evaluation of whatever the learner has learned. Here there are some names, but these are not really very important, which is also called kinesthetic domain. It refers to the natural autonomic responses or reflexes. There are different models of psychomotor domain. One that is put forward by Simpson, which included perception, set, guided response, mechanism, complex overt response. That means to know what will be the result immediately after performance, adaptation, and origination. So here you don't have to look at all these terms. All you need to know is that the psychomotor domain refers to our immediate responses or reflexes to certain events. That's all when it comes to psychomotor domain. And the third and important domain is the affective domain. So the affective or the affect is a term that is associated with our emotions. So this was proposed by Krathwohl, and it is concerned with feelings and emotions which can be arranged as receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization. So when it comes to the spectrum, valuing our circumstances, and a lot of things. So the affective domain is concerned with all the feelings and emotions that come in the process of learning. So we know the cognitive domain, psychomotor domain, and the affective domain. So that's about. Was I audible? Can we go into the questions now? I have a few questions. Can we just discuss them quickly? Right. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll read out the questions and you can make your guesses. Okay. And after that, I have not put the answers in the PPT. So after the guesses being made, I would tell the answers, and then when I'm sharing the PPT, I'll put the answers in bold letters so that you can refer to it later. Shall we begin? Okay, all right. Yeah, so the first question is, which is the characteristic of formative evaluation? So we learned about the types of evaluation. So the question is, what is the characteristic of formative evaluation? The options are, evaluation occurs at the terminal point, that is at the end point. Evaluation is used before program design. Evaluation relates to indicating learning outcome of teaching. Evaluation is conducted during teaching. So what is formative evaluation? Does it occur at the end point, or it occurs before the program design, or does it refer to as learning outcome of teaching, or is it something which happens during the process of teaching? So, okay. All right. Yes, everyone. Everybody is right. It happens during the process of teaching. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the response. Now we'll go to the second question. Which among the following is a non-cognitive characteristic of learner? So just now we talked about the cognitive domain. So here we have 4 options, and which of them is a non-cognitive characteristic? Okay. So first is recalling. Second is problem solving. Third is identifying important sensory inputs. And fourth one is believing what is true. It's a little bit tricky, but let's see. Can I get the options? Something which belongs to the non-cognitive domain. So what happens in the cognitive domain? The thinking, the logical connection making, the responses. So what could be the possible option here? Any chances? Okay, should I? All right. So the answer here is believing what is true. Let me just see. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Neha. Yeah, so the answer is believing what is true, because recalling, problem solving, identifying important sensory inputs, all these are directly connected to the thinking process. But believing is something, it's actually a subjective attitude. We believe in something because we are subjectively associated with that particular aspect. It doesn't really connect directly with the cognitive domain. So that is the answer here. Moving on. We have the third question. In a classroom, content produced for a specific user will lead to, so what happens with the content that is produced for a specific user? So here the question is that if content is being produced only for one person, then what will happen in that kind of teaching? Okay. So the first point is personality development, content filtering, personalization, general academic integration. So what if a teacher is providing information only to one person in the class? Will it be positive? Do you think it is going to be positive? No, yeah, the answer is right. Yes. Third one is the answer. Because it can have a very negative impact because it will be intended only at a particular person. Only that person will be benefiting from it. So that kind of teaching will lead to personalization. Next question. Which of the following is an example of higher order of cognitive learning outcome? So we talked about lower order cognitive outcomes and higher order cognitive outcomes. So based on the action sequences, learning of concepts and abstractions, learning of awareness and valuing. Which do you think belongs to the higher order of cognitive learning outcome? Yes, you're right again. The correct answer is learning of concepts and abstractions, because facts, sequences, everything comes at the basic level, but abstract concepts are or abstractions are very difficult to learn, and that comes at an advanced level of learning. Next question, which of the following is the key behavior contributing to effective teaching? So we talked about effective teaching. Now let's see which of the following will contribute to an effective teaching. First is summarizing what was told by a student. Second, encouraging students to elaborate on an answer. Third, using direct and indirect questioning. Fourth, explaining concepts in a logical step-by-step presentation. Which do you think would be effective? Yeah, actually the correct answer is, the most correct answer is explaining concepts in a logic by through step-by-step presentation, because it comes from the teacher's point of view, right? So there can be a few tricky questions like this, because here, like you suggested, the second point can also be there. But then more than that, from the teacher's point of view, like I mentioned earlier, it has to be systematic. So explaining concepts in a logical step-by-step presentation is the correct answer here. Next question. Sorry. Yeah. Diagnostic evaluation ascertains students' performance at the beginning of instructions, causes and remedies of persistent learning problems during instructions, degree of achievement of instructional objectives at the end, learning progress and failure after instructions. So I just mentioned what is a diagnostic evaluation. So what is the possible answer here? Yeah. The second option is the right answer. Causes and remedies of persistent learning problems during instructions. So you diagnose the problem and you deal with it. That's what happens. Next question. Which teaching aids enhance the skills like reading, listening, and pronunciation? So reading, listening, and pronunciation are certain skills which needs to be enhanced during teaching. So which aid will help in doing that? Audiolingual teaching aids, scientific teaching aids, general knowledge teaching aids, or theoretical based teaching aids? Which do you think is the answer? Yes, everybody is right. Audiolingual teaching aids, like the term suggests, it is the audiolingual teaching aids which will help enhance the skill of listening, pronunciation, and reading. Now, next is a kind of an application question. Not really, but then they're just giving us a situation and we are supposed to answer that. So Anjali's teacher uses VLE, which is a software tool designed to deliver courses online. So the acronym VLE stands for, any guesses? What does the acronym VLE stand for? I have not mentioned it in the topics discussed, but then since it has come up as a question, we'll just look into what is VLE. Any guesses? It is third actually, virtual learning environment. It is nothing. What VLE refers to is all the virtual learning environments or the online platforms that are available for learning. So that is what VLE refers to. We just have to remember the acronym and the definition. That's all is needed. Moving on. We have another question. A teacher gives a lot of positive and negative examples to support his or her presentations in the classroom. This will be related to which level of teaching? We talked about 3 levels of teaching. So here the teacher provides so many examples to support his or her presentations. So in what level of teaching will this impact? Can you get the options? Yeah, here actually it's third. It's the understanding level. I think somebody said the answer. Yeah, it's third. Because the examples, why do we have to learn examples? Because we need to know an in-depth understanding of the concept. So at the understanding level, we employ examples so that the particular concept is understood. At the reflective level, we put our own, our own understanding of the concept, and we do a critical thinking. So that comes at the next stage. But when examples are given to support something, and when the teacher is involving in that, it comes at the understanding level. Because at memory level, it's just about facts. But to understand the subject better, you need examples. So therefore, it comes at the understanding level. Next question. Below are listed some learners' characteristics. Identify those that help in effective teaching. First of all, learners' respect for teacher, learners' level of mental ability, learners' previous experiences, learners' level of interest to study, learners' level of interpersonal relation, learners' view about the society. All the options seem quite similar, but then, yeah, any guesses? Let me check. You can look at the question once again. Of interest to study and learners' view about the society. Yes. Moving on. The ones have taken, you can stop me between. Moving on. Which of the following are the ways to increase motivational climate in the class? Options. Use a variety of instructional strategies to maintain student interest. Give students opportunities to share their experiences and learning. Allow sarcasm and superiority to exhibit in the classroom. Foster classroom atmosphere which is based on trust and cooperation. This is pretty direct. So, which could be the ways to increase motivational climate? Yes, yes. C is the right answer. Except allowing sarcasm and superiority, all the other factors are important. Now, another question is again something which has not been mentioned earlier, but then I just took the question because this has a name of a person and also a model of learning. So, what are the learning styles according to Fleming's WARC model of learning? I would just directly explain it because it has not been mentioned earlier. So the WARC model of learning refers to visual, auditory, read-write, and kinesthetic methods. So what it refers to is that there is a concept called learning style. Okay, so learning style is every individual student will have their own styles of learning depending upon which senses are more receptive to them. For example, I might be able to learn something through the objects that is presented to me. That's because my sight is better than my, or I can better comprehend things through my sight than through hearing or touching. But then for one of you, it might be through touching the objects, and for another person, it could be through hearing things. So this method, these are referred to the learning styles of each learner. So WARC is a method that is developed by a theorist called Fleming, and it helps the student to identify these preferences. So if that model is used in learning, I can identify which method or which style is suitable for me. Is it through my sight? Is it through my hearing? Or is it through my touch? Is it through the haptics that I can learn subjects? So that is what you refer to as WARC model of learning. It refers to the visual, auditory, read-write, and kinesthetic aspects. I hope it's clear. Next question. Which of the following are the humanistic approaches? It emphasizes on self-motivation for better learning. Its emphasis is on learning at the higher level. It fosters curiosity, increases learner's reactivity, believes that learning becomes effective. It is need-based. Any guesses? Humanistic method. The answer. Yeah, actually, the right answer is A, B, D, and E. That is option B. All these are approaches, all these contribute to humanistic. learning. It emphasizes on self-motivation. It has an emphasis on learning at higher level, fosters curiosity, increases learners' reactivity to circumstances, believes that learning becomes more effective when it is need-based. So all the options are important. Another question, the last set of questions. Which of the following is a major advantage of online learning over offline learning? This is again a simple question, but this has been asked in previous question papers. So what is an advantage of online learning over offline learning? Is it limited access, flexibility, high cost, or interactivity? Yes, it is the flexibility. Like we can get access to online learning from anywhere at any point of time. The last question is, which of the following are the basic requirements for effective teaching? So this topic comes up again and again because it has been recurrently asked in the previous question papers. So effective teaching is very important area. So you have to keep reminding yourselves of the terms that are associated here. So first point, teaching only what is included in the curriculum, good communication skills, using a rigid teaching approach, excellent subject knowledge, ability to connect with students. So what could be the points here that refer to effective teaching? Yes, you are right. 2, 4, and 5. That is option C. So yeah, so that's all about teaching aptitude for today. So I'll just quickly sum up the points that I have talked about. Planning, evaluation, and how it is an interactive process, how flexible is continuous and specialization is required, and certain modes of teaching and the different objectives of teaching, that is to bring about desirable changes in the student, sharing of knowledge, building skills, and overall behavioral development, the dependent, independent, and intervening variables in teaching, and the objectives of teaching from different points of view, then the nature and characteristics of learning, the change in behavior, experience, practice, exposure to new knowledge, then the objectives of learning, which are that it promotes an idea or positive change, how it's a transferable process, knowledge, and learners problems. Practice learning, what is teaching, breaking down subjects into small parts, basic comprehension, and the different teaching methods like lecture method, team teaching, video presentations, then heuristic method, flipped classroom method, assignments method, case study method, instructions, project method, open learning, and peer learning. And how these methods are important, and the different audio, visual, and audiovisual aids. Different evaluation methods, characteristics, objectives, and process of evaluation, formative, diagnostic, summative, norm reference, and criterion referenced evaluation, and also about Bloom's taxonomy, the 3 levels of teaching, and the 3 domains of teaching. So yes, that's it. Any queries, any doubts? I hope I was it okay?
Thank you, ma'am. So our session has come to an end. Now it's time for questions. Anybody having any doubts?
Yeah. Any doubts, anything? Thank you so much. You have all been very attentive. I know this is a very dry topic, but then it's important for from a NET perspective. So I guess that you just have to keep in mind all the important terms, because I have not found any very new questions in this area. But then it's important that you look at the effective teaching methods, and also some of the things we can maybe look at. I will just type it here. I haven't included that in my slide, but then I'll just type it here. You can just look at these aspects as well. Curriculum models is one thing. 1 second. Yeah, then comes learning styles. Learning styles. Then learning management systems. Learning management systems. Learning management systems refers to certain websites which can be used in creating online content. Like we all have these online content, like we have textbook, IFR and all those things. So those are coming from this whole system of learning management. That is, it is a platform which manages all these online courses. So you can refer to that as well. Yeah. Yes, that's it. Any other queries? I hope it was useful. I hope you could get some points. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Risha, then can we conclude?
So it's time to end the class. It was such an interactive session.
Thank you.
It was such an amazing session, and thanks to each and every one of you for cooperating. So let's meet in the next session tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.